Welcome to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Every week, I'll be sitting down with a sales executive where they'll share their stories and experiences that produce game-changing results. Let's be honest, sales can be a tough game. I'm sure at some point, we've all delivered a less than stellar demo, been ghosted by a client or two, and sometimes maybe we did more talking than listening. And that's where I can help. The stories and insights our guests share can be applied to your own business, your territory, or with your team, so you're not reinventing the wheel. Our weekly tactics and strategies help you get out of your head and start creating your own path towards game-changing results.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Breakfast for Champions. And this week we have an entirely Canadian affair. Don't worry, no maple syrup or anything like that. This week we welcome Karen Kelly, and Karen is the CEO of K2 Perform. And she works with sales leaders and their teams who struggle to bridge the sales performance gap. Her techniques and iterative approach allows them to disrupt the status quo and attract their ideal client in a very noisy digital environment. And it's just getting noisier by the day. Karen empowers her clients to embrace their human side, engage a deeper level and accelerate sales through strategic and meaningful conversations. Her sales training and coaching programs are offered both face-to-face, in person, and coming in September, self-direct online. Karen, welcome to the breakfast.
Thank you, Tibor. Excited to be here.
I'm always concerned because, you get to go through these things. Maybe if you can round out the introduction a little bit and give us a little bit more sense of Karen and K2.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. First of all, proud to be Canadian. No maple syrup, but we may drop an A or two along the way. 20 years in corporate sales, saw a lot of experience challenges personally, of course, starting, very early in my 20s. And just, obviously landing in it by accident, which I think most people do. And really near the end of my corporate career, starting to self-develop myself, really look at things from a different angle and really understand, what problems am I trying to solve and the value. And value is such an overused, vague word because value is usually, perceived value. And it's like, what do my clients really want? So I just took it seriously. And I just wanted to be the person to others that I never had. I never had a sales coach. I really didn't have a lot of mentors. A lot of it was, you were given sales training along the way. And when you really look at it, it was product training. And there was never any positioning, never any, understanding what the customers are going through. And even at that persona level, like that's a person, like what struggles do they have with their team personally? What does this deal mean to them? And I think that level of sensitivity and just really understanding, like we're people, we're just trying to help people, and I think when you take it to that simplest form, it becomes really easy to connect with them and really determine if or not you can help them. So 4 years ago, I launched K2 Performance Consulting, and I work with sales leaders, sales teams, and really help bridge the gap. So, a lot of it starts with that process. They don't have a process. For most people now, it's not reflective of the environment we work in. So it's like getting in your car, going on a road trip, and you have no GPS. And it's like, where are you going? And so that's what I do in a nutshell. And again, now it's virtual. So I was always doing virtual before, and now it's flipped 100% virtual. So I was an early adopter. I love it. And now I'm just helping others become more comfortable with it so they can create that experience that the customers are looking for.
So you touched on a whole bunch of things that we can unpack, and I wanted to maybe see if you have, what you see as a reason for it, because let's face it, all new salespeople, you can wind them up and they'll all repeat it. People buy from people, people buy from people. Yet, as you said, when it comes to the actual sale, they forget that and they don't have that people to people connection. So why is it that they know it? Like they get the test right, they just don't apply it.
Well, is this in virtual or is this overall?
Overall in general in sales, and then we'll get into virtual about some of the challenges of being empathetic virtually and such.
I think unfortunately sellers are in the seller's mindset, and they're so me focused, and especially newer sellers, they're coming in and they have a slide deck and they have product specs that they have to get across. Right. And they're pitching and they're just like, okay, I did it. I got through all the slides and I got my 5 questions. So yes, you're compliant, you pass what was asked of you. But if you just think about it from, I always say the OPP, the other person's perspective, and just before you even take that meeting, like, why did they take that meeting? Like, what do they hope that would come out of this? What do they, maybe what are their apprehensions or their fears? Because all of a sudden you're thinking at it from, you're coming at it from a different lens. And that's where empathy comes in. That's where an understanding of their true problem is. And that, just that 3 to 5 minute exercise allows you to ask questions that are completely different. They're buyer focused. They're not seller focused, and their guard comes down because they feel, and that's what it is. We buy on emotion, and they feel that you're genuinely curious because of the questions you're asked. You care, and all this is because you've taken a few minutes to really come at it from their lens, their approach. What does it mean if they don't solve this problem? Like, who else are they looking at? So really just remove you from it and consider the other person's perspective before you engage with them. And I think that's a huge shift.
Yeah, I think that's one of it's huge, but it's a simple one too, because as you say, I like that other people, not OPP, but not the Ontario Provincial Police, but the other side of it, because I think that's something that I struggle to get salespeople to look at. What's the customer's perspective of the same situation? Because if you're looking at the head side of the tail, they're looking of the coin, they're looking at the other side. So, and so again, it's one of these, I think from my perspective, I'm curious what you think. A lot of it does come down to what you touched on earlier, which is the coaching available and the role of the manager and how they send their people out in the morning. So I'm curious, in the non-virtual, and we'll get into the virtual part, how can managers ensure that their reps are actually taking the OPP as opposed to a different police force?
We'll bring in the Metro and the Mounties as well here, just to be
Exactly.
truly Canadian.
Right.
I think it is incumbent upon the manager to really to promote that. But to be honest, a lot of managers are not. They're doing the same thing, right? So it's a cultural shift. And I think a lot of this is even looking at case studies or bringing in, what I always suggest is bring in one of your customers, your existing customers, and let them share with you like the experience and why they went with you and maybe some of the feelings, because we don't, hindsight's 2020. So as I'm going through this discovery phase, and I think I'm asking these thought-provoking questions, and my customers thinking, this is all on our website, like this is not a good use of my time. So I think getting that feedback from your customer firsthand, like it shows that what went well, what didn't work, and really allows you to get into their brain so you get that feedback. Otherwise it's perception versus reality. And I think if a manager can arrange that, they really look at the case studies, like what's that before and after, and really, bring it down to the micro level, like what did we do in that stage? So look at the buyer's journey and what did we do that accelerated it or that there was a choke in the flow. And I think when you can pinpoint it, that's when you can tweak it or make these modifications. And too often I see people just abandon it. They're like, oh, this didn't work. It's like, hang on a minute, figure out where it didn't work. And it's a tweak. Don't throw it out. It's still good.
Salespeople don't want to watch the game tape, they don't want to know what they can, do differently and so forth. So it's interesting from that perspective. But I find that despite the fact of what you said, that when you tell salespeople to go back and talk to the customers, they're always trying to get that compliment. And I find that often the best information is found out when you can talk about something that didn't go right, everybody addressed it, it got fixed, and there was a different outcome than everybody expected. So I think that, or maybe I'm asking, do you feel that we only want to hear the good news, and we, as a result of not hearing the bad news, we don't have the opportunity to improve?
I think that's bang on. And I had Todd Capone on, and we talked about on my podcast, and we talked about celebrating and humanizing the failures, because I think there's so many lessons in the failures. And this is where, I think it's leaders' job to create a culture, a continuous learning culture, but saying that, failure shows that you tried. And I think that's half of it. Obviously, if you're going to continue to repeat the same mistakes, it's not growth. But
Right.
if you failed, like what was the lessons in the failure? And also to say, like, let's celebrate the failures because there's learnings in it. You know, what can we take from this to apply moving forward, whether it's you know, on a personal level. Sometimes things are out of our control, but just even now we're mindful. Okay, so at this stage, this can happen, whether it's a tech,
Right.
whether it's something on the customer side. Like we need to be aware of that so we can prepare ourselves and arm ourselves for if it arises again in the future.
Yeah, not every sale has to be a bungee jump, it can be some predictability around it and so forth.
That's
So
a good
speaking of bungee
analogy.
jumping, this COVID thing, beyond the health issue has become somewhat of a terrifying thing for some salespeople because they're very much used to that in-person sale, almost addicted to that in-person sale, and now that's been taken away. So
Hmm.
as you say, you've been at it for a while. I've been virtual for some time. Prospecting for the most part has been virtual. But what are some of the key things that people need to think about, and what are some mistakes to clearly avoid?
I would say, you know, the biggest thing I see is people are approaching it in the exact same ways face to face. And they're just kind of, you know, it's like retrofitting. And it's like, it's not a retrofit. You kind of have to start from scratch and really build it up because in person, we kind of had the luxury of, you know, there was back and forth banter. You didn't have to be as intentional because I could pick up in your body language. So it unfortunately it allowed for a little bit of mediocrity to slip in there. You know, you didn't have to be as
To be
stellar as
overlooked.
it totally was overlooked because there was like some, you know, high-fiving and, you know, this stuff was able to go by that now it doesn't fly. So you have to be way more intentional. People's attention spans are a gnat, right? So you need to get on there. And this is where that other person's perspective comes on before you get on your call, before you turn on your camera. So many people just wing it and they flip it on. They have no agenda. They have no objective. And I
Mm.
always say the currency we trade in now is time. Like you have to be very purposeful. People need to know why they're going to give you your time. And again, even to get that first call, you have to exchange value for time. So a lot of people are just taking that same approach. They're not prepared. So they're not others focused. They're not familiar with the technology. So they're,
Right.
you know, they're baffling all over the place or unaware. Where to even look in the camera. So they're looking down and the whole thing is connection,
Like
really
this?
getting comfortable. Yeah. Looking down or a screen. And even if you're going to do a screen, like if you're double monitor, like let them know, or I'm just taking notes, Tibor. So if you see me looking down, let them know so that there's an awareness there. But I
Right.
think technology is here to stay. So really get comfortable with it so that you can have the freedom to connect and engage with your audience. Because if you're too apprehensive and you're like, I'm not really sure of this, that that's going to translate to a robot, right? And you're not at ease. And then you look at your objective as to connect, to disarm them. That's not happening because you're too inward focused because you're unsure of what you're doing. So I think, you know, really having a framework, a purpose, getting comfortable with the technology. And then the basics, like if you have a bad message, irrespective of if you're doing it on the phone or in person or video, it's still a bad message, right? So make sure that there's still value to your client, not to you. That's perceived value. What's valuable to them? What do they really care about?
So beyond being ready, as you say, familiar with the technology, understanding what the perspective of the other person is and so on, what are some just basic tactical or basic things that they need to think about that make a virtual meeting different? And as a result of that, what can they do to make up for that difference?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think even leading up to the meeting. So when you're sending the invite, have an agenda in your Zoom meeting. Let them know what's prepared. Invite them a few days before to, you know, is there anything you'd like to add? You want active participation. So this isn't my agenda. I want us to co-create this. So what else have I missed? And I think you're also looking at intent there. If they're adding something, they're coming as an active participant. They're a player to the table, which you want. Even a lot of times videos everywhere. So I send a quick video. I'm looking forward to, you know, again, if I've never met them, I can send you, Tibor, a 40-second video. Looking forward to discussing with you on Friday at 8 o'clock. These are the three things I wanted to do. Please feel free to add what you would like to do. So that again creates that humanized connection that I was talking about. Because when we actually turn on our cameras, there's a sense of I've already met this person. Even though we haven't, video does that. It creates a humanized connection. sometimes if it's a group meeting, you can send a video in advance saying, just because you're going to have people at different levels, different departments, how do you get that common denominator? And you can say, I just wanted to share with you the 5, things we should be thinking about so that when we all arrive to the meeting, we're all on the same page. That could compress the meeting from a 30-minute meeting to a 20-minute meeting. And you have all these people now ready to come. They're already thinking of questions to ask. So again, that participation is there. You've primed them in advance of the call. And again, when you don't do that and you just show up and you have people and they just think, oh God, this is a waste of 20 minutes. You've already got them thinking of questions, of potential directions they could go. And that's collaboration. You want that joint. You don't want to be pulling them and them digging their heels in. You want them to come along with you because you've invited them, and it shows you're intentional and you're respectful of their time.
And the other thing, something you touched on earlier that people just want to sort of transition into as though they were doing a live meeting, the lack of body language, as you said, they can't see your smiling face and all that, is what I found is I have to actually become more of a choreographer or a maitre d', because there's a group of people on the other side. When you're sitting in a conference room, it's easy to go one-to-one, but when in a virtual environment, you've got to make sure everybody knows their order and things like that, or at least help them and extract information that way. So I think that there is an opportunity to be a choreographer and move the meeting, as you say, from 30 minutes to 20 minutes with meaning.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of, like you touched on the length of meeting and so forth, people are getting more and more restless by the day. Should we be gearing meetings differently? Should they be more bite-sized with, smaller next steps, or, am I just reaching here?
Well, are you talking about customer facings or internal,
Yeah, customer facing, like, in a virtual meeting, in a meeting, like an environment like this, whether you're using, one company versus the other, should we, normally I think about, an hour meeting when we used to be in a face-to-face, when I used to go in and meet with a VP. Now I can get that same stuff done in about 30 minutes without feeling like that, I've sacrificed the social element in any way. It just seems to facilitate faster meetings. Or am I just drinking too much coffee?
No, I don't think you're drinking too much coffee. I think there's, again, time is what we want back. So I think if we are purposeful with our time, and I also don't think you need video for everything. Like, there can be a phone call, there can be email. We need to be taking an omni-channel approach. But I think that if we can be purposeful, that we can compress these meetings. I think when we, and knowing, like, not too much, like what stage are we at now? What do we need to accomplish so that we can move forward? Because I think when you're biting off too much and then you ask for that next step, you've either covered too much and the next step is diluted, or you haven't done enough and they're like, we're really not prepared to do it. So I think really looking at the buyer's journey, what piece of information, what if I get, like, what do they need to get at this to give me time for the next one? And really ensure that get is accurate, because the way people buy pre-pandemic and the problem they're solving, the people involved, there's so many things that have changed that if you go in there assuming that everything is the same and it's not, like, you've lost, because they're just thinking, I'm relying on you to take me and guide this process. And you have no idea where you're going, because the process is not the same. The people are not the same. The way we make a decision is not the same. So I think absolutely bite-sized, smaller, again, but just more intentional, more purposeful. And you can do that again with video, getting that engagement, and even just being, well, why are we here? So at the end of this call, we should be in a position, based on this stage and what I see with other customers, that we're ready to move to this. Is everybody agree with that? So gain consensus. So we know not only where we are, but where we're going. If you don't let that out up front, nobody wants surprises. So when you ask at the end of that meeting, are we ready to move forward? And they're thinking, oh, well, I need finance at the table and I had all these questions. Like, why didn't you let me know? So I think that comes down to being very purposeful and intentional of your communication, where we're going. And customers need to know that. They're not going to move blindly, right? So here's the big picture. Here's the macro and here's the micro. This is what we need. Are you guys comfortable? What else do we need? Like, get their involvement. But that can be accomplished in bite size. So it's still intentional, but we're moving incrementally. And then there's no close, because it's so organic. You've gone boom, 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 that they're going to say, okay, are we ready to sign? people are afraid of the close. The close is going to happen on its own if you've done the process right.
Yeah, I think a lot of people miss that, the close is the end of it. So if you didn't do the work before that, it's not going to happen at the end. And so, I think the other thing, and be curious about your opinion, that people are missing now is, I think it is true that in turmoil, there's opportunity, right? So a lot of customers who may be confident in what they're doing in their direction 2 years ago are not so confident now. And salespeople have the ability to step into the role of subject matter experts. So two questions on that. One is, how do they do that? And the other is maybe more of an opinion piece. Why don't many more do it? So what are some techniques that salespeople can really take advantage of now to move the clients into uncomfortable or uncharted territories?
I think you have to be okay with that yourself, because I think, we've all been through a year and a half of uncertainty. And I think a few things is, even just before you enter them and try to help bridge them, are you going there whole yourself? Like, are you able to move them? And if you're not solid yourself, if you're not agile, if you're not vulnerable, saying like, I've never been here before, especially with leadership, and like, I'm not fully aware of how to do this because it's uncharted waters, but I'm going to go there anyway. And I think just doing that to your team, or if you're doing that to your clients, you've disarmed them, because there's this human connection. You're not trying to pretend that you're someone, I've done this before, I got this. And they're just thinking, how do you have this? No one's ever been here before. So I think being honest and really coming at it from a place of genuine trying to help, and then just being the subject matter expert in that, through iterations, through others you're trying to help, through reading reports. Like, I'm reading McKinsey, Gartner, all these things that are gathering the data to say, like, this is where like 3/4 of buyers and sellers enjoy the digital process. So anyone that's digging their heels in, it's time to get on board. And I think it's a mindset piece of just like, this is where it's going. So the longer I push back, I'm just creating resistance for me, because it's like trying to put a round peg in a square hole. It's not going to go. So I have to just surrender to virtual and become the subject matter expert. So embrace the technology, get on podcasts, read, what are my customers enjoying? How can I facilitate? Our job now is to facilitate a buying purchase. That's it. They're driving the bus. We're just, sometimes we're at the back of it, but how can we facilitate? So being a subject matter expert is writing content that's timely, that's going to help them, that's going to get them thinking different. And then that's going to drive when I ask for a meeting, well, yeah, because you know what? I read something she wrote there, and it's relevant, it's timely. And I get a sense that she understands what we're going through. So I think subject matter expert, to bring it back to your question, is we have to become almost mini marketers and really, educate them, teach them, share insights with them that's going to help them adapt to the new way we're buying, so that both parties are successful.
Yeah, I think you touched on it earlier. I think we have to be the play, as it were. I did a piece just recently about how the one thing we want the customer to do, we refuse to demonstrate as salespeople, which is change, right? Mm-hmm. We come at them with the exact same approach as the last guy and the next guy and so on. So we don't stand out. So we're giving them no reason to change, yet that's what we're asking them to do, So I want to sort of take it back as we get to the bottom of the half hour, because we do promise our people that they'll be out of here by 8:30 and making money by 9. We touched on the manager's role earlier. I know that that's probably a year and a half topic on its own. But what are some of the things that managers can, maybe even just one significant thing that you can think of that they need to think about changing in the way that they lead and coach their salespeople as a result of this? Because they're probably doing it virtually more now than before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it starts, culture, obviously adopting a coaching culture. So, you mentioned as they coach, I would take it back a step and say, start coaching, because I don't know how many managers are actually coaching their team. And I think when you say
be optimistic on Fridays.
Well, that's good. A for optimism, but I'm a realist, so I see what's going on out there. And I think, saying and doing are two different things. And I hear, people are our number one asset. But you have to ask yourself, like, what are you doing to support them? So I would say, first of all, adopt a culture. Like, leaders create the culture, and create a culture of continuous learning and development, and do that through coaching. Because I think when you look at everything, whether it's training, what you're trying to accomplish, micro learning, it's all that reinforcement. So if I come in and do a 9 to 4 training, which was pre-pandemic, I don't think those long day sessions are going to go anymore. You're going to retain 10%. So it's the same as internal meetings. How as a leader, can you reinforce this with me? Like, let me try it on. Let's role play. Let's talk about it on an account basis, on a persona, on an individual basis, to really set me up for success. So I think leaders' role is to absolutely coach. I think when it comes to coaching, they need to have the consistency. The reps got to drive it, and they have to be accountable for it. But you also, you also have to share the why behind it. And I think when leaders come at it without sharing the why, it comes at the rep feels that they're micromanaged. Maybe are they doing this because I'm not hitting my numbers? And I think when you, again, coming to the vulnerability piece and say, look, the reason why I'm doing this is because my job as your leader is to develop you, is to support you, and is to help you achieve your goals. And in order for me to do that, we're going to be coaching every week. So we're going to, identify goals. We're going to work through them together. And just that support, you're going to get buy-in. They're going to want to be accountable because they have a sense of ownership. You're coming at them, same as your customer, like the way you're treating and developing your team, that co-creation, that commitment to change is exactly the same as what you're doing with your customers. You're trying to loosen their grip on status quo, right? And so coming at it with the desire to help. And then just understanding their personal motivation. So if you achieve this goal, what does this mean to you, Tibor? Because someone else is going to mean something completely different. And then they feel they matter. So as you're asking them to do things for them and for the team, they're going to do it because they feel valued. So I think that's a big step, what I see, because I do a lot of call coaching and I review the game tape, and that's where the money's at. The game tape is everything, because awareness is so, you think you don't do something or you think you are doing something. And when you watch it, it's black, you are or you aren't. And you're like, oh, wow, that was really abrupt there. I saw them, take a step back. So I think looking at the game tape is huge. But I see people enter these coaching calls with no context. And the back goes up, and my back would go up too, because I'm thinking, why are you doing this? So I think starting with, whole Simon Sinek, starting with your why. I'm here to help you. I'm coming at it from a place of genuinely trying to help. Same as your customer. You have buy-in now. Okay, my back's down. Where are we going, coach?
So some of the people are going to go because, we are coming up on the half hour, and I did promise to let them go.
Okay.
Where can they continue the dialogue with you? Where can they get more information? We'll have all the significant links in the notes, but, please tell the folks where to find Karen.
Okay, thank you. You can find me on LinkedIn, Karen Kelly. You can find me, you can email me, Karen@k2perform.com. My website's K2Perform, and I host the K2 Sales podcast on Apple and Spotify. So I think I'm easy enough to find. So LinkedIn would be great start, or email would be fine as well.
Well, I want to thank for those who's sitting in the live session. Join us again next week. We'll have Thomas Ellis joining us from DC. If you missed any of it, or you want to hear Karen again, don't forget that you can get the audio version Monday morning in the Monday Morning Breakfast podcast. Thank you, Karen. If you'd like to stay on, we can continue the dialogue. But for our folks who are heading out to sell,